Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I do hope everyone is doing well, and welcome to today's upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. With that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? All right, guys, we're going to start the day off with a absolutely horrific encounter. Jump down the rabbit hole, come back up for some more encounters. I shared this one on Saturday night's live stream. For those of you that weren't there, this is a just awesome experience. It was winter of 1997, I believe. I was living in Ketchikan, Alaska, and serving in the National Guard as an 11B. I loved it. As some may know, a joint task force between all branches of the military began working on building a road on a nearby island, an island. This was the fulfillment of a 50 or so year treaty the United States made with the sovereign Native Americans in the Metlakatla. This was a big project that I believe finished in 2007. Anyway, the Marines spent the first summer building the headquarters. It was a series of plywood huts and framework of a mess hall. When summer ended, the huts were basically just sheds. There was no electricity or running water. Well, me and 5 other members of my unit were called on active duty. We were tasked with living on the island for the winter and protecting the camp. Apparently, the local native youth would hop from island to island, vandalizing vacant logging camps and such. This was classified as a training mission for budget purposes. It seemed like it'd be a good time, 6 months in the winter on a remote island living in a plywood hut. At first, things were somewhat rocky. There was only going to be 4 or 5 of us on the island at a time, with a weekend rotation every 2 or 3 weeks for 1 or 2 of us. It took a couple of months before we had a real generator or propane to cook with. So we ate MREs 3 meals a day for quite some time. The worst was that there was only one outhouse in the entire camp, which was placed a few hundred yards from camp. To make it even worse, the Native Americans, for whatever reason, declared the ground sacred, and we were not allowed to relieve ourselves upon it. That means if we needed to take a leak or drop some kids off at the pool, we had to march down to the outhouse in the Alaskan winter. For the most part, I was loving it. We bonded together, told jokes, played push-up poker, and overall just had a grand time roughing it. Well, to make a long story longer, the heart of the winter came, and so did the snow, and lots of it. By that time, we had these weird heaters that ran on diesel fuel, so we were quite cozy in our huts. However, the one facility left unheated was the outhouse, and not only was it freezing inside, but it was filled up. You see, the bay boat used to bring the porta-potty truck had frozen over. By the 3rd month of our stay, the entire outhouse contents were dangerously close to rising above the toilet seat. It was disgusting. It was freezing. It became a nightmare to use. Give me a slit trench over an outhouse any day of the week. Even now, thinking about this massive frozen mound makes me cringe. I can still see the steam that would rise from the hole and out of the vents of that porta potty after each use. Anyway, despite the bizarreness of the outhouse, that was not the scary part. One night, as the four of us were lying around on our cots, ready for bed, a few of us were listening to a book on tape that Doc had brought with him. I believe it was Carl Sagan's Contact. It was either that for entertainment or Art Bell's Coast to Coast radio show, the only English station we could get on the radio. If you don't know who he is, check him out. It's all about aliens, Bigfoot, and other paranormal stuff. Well, we heard noises outside. Now, that may not be scary, but let me tell you, we hadn't heard any noises, day or night. There isn't a whole lot of action going on during the middle of winter in the middle of nowhere. At first, we thought it may be some native kids coming to goof off, tag the place, and set it afire. Seemed logical. Before we came to the island, we had been given tours of nearby logging camps that were decimated. We were warned that this was what they would do to our camp if we did not protect it. Well, if it was them, we were ready for them. Wait, no, we weren't. Who am I kidding? We would have wanted to lock and load and go on the offensive if it wasn't for the fact that we were in a training exercise. That meant we didn't have any ammunition. We just had M16s, but nothing to go with them. Well, we are now no longer lying in our cots. Instead, we are getting dressed and discussing who it was that was going to investigate with an unloaded rifle. Just then, we heard sounds come to our door. It was not human. We could hear them breathing loud. Our PFC was the one who had been picked to lead the charge, but he flat out refused, and none of us blamed him. We didn't want this to become some Alaskan version of Southern Comfort, the movie, meets Predator, the movie, if you know what I mean. So we all sat in silence for 10 or so minutes until the huffing and snorting faded away. A few minutes afterwards, we manned up and opened the door. We immediately saw in the snow the largest set of prints we had ever seen. I swear these were the size of pie plates. Anything attached to those paws must have been the size of a small horse, or at least a dining room table. So, about that outhouse, you remember, the one that's 100 yards away? Well, it used to be that if you woke up in the middle of the night and needed to drain yourself, you would take a hike down to the outhouse. Not anymore. Instead, we made a massive patch of yellow snow right next to the door. It became customary to open the door, point to the side, and melt some snow. There was no way on God's green earth anybody was walking all the way down to that isolated outhouse with those beasts out in the dark. Our NCOIC, after spending a weekend in Ketchikan, brought back his diving light. This thing was the brightest flashlight I had ever seen. It made the night into day. Anyway, one night we were all joking and smoking. We were teasing the PFC because he had to take a dump. It wasn't like he could just hang his ass out the door. That was one thing we didn't want to find come spring when the generals and other dignitaries would be touring the place. Not at all. The PFC was starting to gather up the courage to actually head down to the outhouse. Good for him. He got as far as opening the door, fully dressed for the freezing temperature. As he was about to walk out, the sergeant flicked on his diving light and pointed it toward the outhouse. He was being nice, and he was going to light the way. As the light poured down the hill, we could make out the outhouse And wouldn't you know it, standing next to the crapper was what looked like a wolf. Its eyes lit up like two little moons. It stared up towards us, not moving. Even though we were a good 300 feet or so from it, the PFC hurriedly backwalked deeper into the hunt. Sarge kept his light shined on that unholy-sized beast until the light started to overheat. That creature saw us. It knew there was more of us than it. Yet, didn't move an inch. It just stood there staring at us while we stared at it. When Sarge turned off the diving light, it was still staring at us. It was us who broke the gaze so that we could close the door. That creature knew who was in charge, and we knew it as well. To this day, books on tape still give me the creeps. All right, so in Saturday's live stream, I shared that. And what I said was that this experience goes along with the other Alaskan experience that I shared. And in the video, it was funny because everyone agreed with me at the live stream. In the video, there was a group of security guys and a couple oil guys that worked at this, I think it was an oil refinery or something like that up in Alaska. And they had a run-in with a dogman in the middle of the night. The next day, coincidentally, they had taken a picture of the largest wolf ever. And in the upload itself and in the title, I just said actual photo of large wolf in Alaska after men have encounter. And everyone was like, that's not a picture of a dog, man. And everyone agreed with me hearing what I said. I never said that that was a picture of a dog, man. It was just absolutely the biggest wolf I had ever seen. This thing was easily 250 to 300 pounds, just this lion of a wolf. And I only say lion of a wolf because we all know that there are no bigger dogs than a wolf. Not anymore, at least. But interestingly enough, these men have a experience with a dogman, catch a photo of this just giant wolf. These guys have this horrific experience with this wolf-like creature. Another thing, they're on an island. They had toured the island. Marines had been on the island earlier that summer. No one had seen that wolf or those creatures on that island. Now, in the middle of winter, there it is. How? Where? Pretty crazy, right? Let's go down the rabbit hole. This folder has all of the information. Just kidding. For those of you who have not been to the live streams, you guys gotta come. It is a fun time. A lot of information shared. The following is a very unusual incident, as if the subject of reptilians is not unusual enough, this deals with apparent temporal manipulation, such as that being experimented with by the Montauk Project, which the draconian forces based below the Giza Plateau reportedly have a strong investment in. Some have suggested that with all of the temporal casualty violations taking place in our time or world line linear reality as we know it, it will eventually begin to dissolve into a multilinear reality, somewhat in between a reality escape and a dream escape, or rather, the very foundations of the linear third dimension as we perceive it will begin to just become nothing. So genetic, psychology, fraternal, political, and economic manipulation is apparently not the only form of intervention that the Dracos or reptilians have been involved in. It is said that the Earth's unique electromagnetic grid allows for the possibility of strange temporal manipulations and even alternate time branches. The clincher is that there is only so much energy to go around in that, like a tree. All time branches feed off the same base or trunk. So, the more branches that exist, the less energy there is to go around. Apparently, the Montauk Project and its draconian overseers had generated several alternate history lines, some having failed to acquire full material manifestation, in essence liquefying into the fourth dimension ectoplasm realities, whereas others possess the necessary collective psionic and psychic energy focus to convert subatomic energy waves into matter particles. There are claims that this area of the galaxy surrounding the planet Earth is much older than surrounding sectors due to the various alternate timeline replays, and that even this world line is not the original. That much temporal manipulation has occurred. For instance, naval Philadelphia and Montauk agents going back in time from an original world line in order to stop Germany from winning World War II. The renegade Pleiadians, who were actually descended from German Nordic space colonies in the original world line, coming back to help Hitler and this world line defeat the Normandy invasion, which they failed to do. However, they did succeed in helping the Germans infiltrate America and take over the Montauk projects by taking over the NSA/CIA. According to some Montauk researchers, John F. Kennedy lived to a good old age in an earlier timeline, and once he discovered the Nazi infiltration of the Montauk projects and the involvement of the draconian reptilians, the Regalian Greys, and the Syrian B. Alberon Aryans, he came down hard on the project, but not before several Thule Society agents were able to escape back in time and assassinate Kennedy. Many unusual paranormal events were involved with the JFK murder. There are also claims that other aliens came back from the future of the original world line and wiped out most of the Earth's population via biological warfare. Thank God we are not living in that dimension. However, these aliens, genetic hybrids from the original world line future, are reportedly very involved in this world line. Some have our best interests to stake, whereas others do not. Anyway, in order to keep from going insane with confusion, it might be easier to view the timeline as a tree rather than a line. Even through other time or world lines may exist, they are still nevertheless part of the same metaversal reality, the tree. Montauk agents admit that in order to change the history of one time branch, they would have to change all branches simultaneously, which is apparently impossible. It is said that the energy grid of the planet Earth, which is unique in our universe, can only energize half a dozen or so third destiny or third destiny facet world lines, as it takes energy to maintain a linear material reality. Above and beyond this, reality becomes a bit slippery. As the energy/matter ratio drifts more to the energy side, it is said that there is at least one world line that is even more dense, linear than this one in which one does not encounter the municipality of the 14 type paranormal manifestations phenomena, which is apparently the resulting factor of a reality that has experienced major temporal casualty violation and manipulation. And as a result, many believe that this world line will begin to drift into a more energized, multilinear reality in or around the year unknown. The following is apparently one of the major efforts on a part of the alien/human Montauk agenda to generate a world line through temporal manipulation, one involving a nuclear attack on American soil in the fall or November of 1997. There were several prophecies of this occurrence. However, most now say that it did not, but there has been others besides Jim who claim to have encountered this alternate reality, one in which the Draco interventionalists are apparently implicated to the core. Some may have the feeling that they are existing in one or more dimensions simultaneously. Could this explain such feelings? The human soul can only produce so much energy. And like the energy grid of planet Earth itself, the human soul can only exist in so many dimensions at once before it is spread too thin. However, more suitable levels of our soul can apparently interact with the weaker event lines. As I said, there is reportedly only a half a dozen or so actual lines. Then there are more energized probability lines, quasi third dimensional realities, a possibility lines, ectoplasm realities, and ghost lines, dream pools, or used up probability, actual lines may become activated on the ectoplasmic level as collective human conscious energy focus breathes life into them. So basically what they're saying is that these dimensions, picture a tree, multiple dimensions, the Draconians helped humanity manipulate dimensional time. So in essence, when Montauk, Philadelphia project happened, they didn't go back in our dimension. They went back in a different dimension. That's why so many of these men, when they traveled and came back, some came back really messed up, as many of you know. Some came back saying they saw monsters that were enormous. The earth had changed. And what it is believed that they traveled to an alternate dimension. So, in essence, did they time travel? Or did they just jump dimensions? But enough of this pulsulating. As I stated, several claim to have had interactions with following parallel reality. The question would be, did time agents go into the past to create or prevent this nuclear attack in the fall of 97? If you are one who desires to be part of the universe that you can put in a box and fully comprehend, then such discussions of a multifaceted holographic reality may not be for you. I do not believe in infinite actuality lines as depicted in the Sliders series, the Sci-Fi Channel. However, I do suspect that if there are any multidimensional imperialistic parasites that could be equivalated to the Cro-Mags in that series, it would be the Draconians. Here is something that was sent to me. So right here, he's saying, like we all say a lot, we say it here a lot, that there are soft disclosures in Hollywood, in the media. I believe 100% was a soft disclosure. Some say Dog Soldiers was. I don't believe it. I think it's just more of an entertaining movie. But there are soft disclosures going on all the time that, just point to what really is going on. So, hello everyone. I've been waiting to see if anybody else on this may have experienced something similar. I don't want to put thoughts in anyone's heads. This was not a dream. It was not an obe. It was real. It did happen. And Dracos are real, and they bleed red blood. I can't explain it. I don't know how it happened or why. All I know is it did happen. It was 3 weeks ago. I still have mixed feelings about sharing this, but here goes. I climbed the roof of a building I was working on, rebuilding and expanding the capacity of a silo that stores plastic pellets at Redacted in Indiana, Evansville, Indiana. When I got to the top, I felt dizzy, disoriented for a few seconds. I thought that I was having another numbness attack that I told Redacted I've been having. I grabbed hold of a pipe to get my balance. When I felt stable again, I looked around and everything had changed. The sky was gray and smoky looking. Buildings all around me were either demolished or still smoldering from fire. There were cars on the highway out front wrecked or just abandoned. There were bodies, some still smoldering, lying everywhere. It was sickening. I just stood there, looking in amazement. I was trying to figure out if I had missed something or if I was dreaming, but I was there. My truck was gone, and so was Lee. All my tools, welding leads, torches, and material was gone. And then I realized that the bins that I were working on were finished. I opened the lid of one I was working on at the time, and it was half full of material. It was then that I realized that I must be in the future. I began to look for something with a date on it so that I could find out exactly when or where I was. If I was in the future, I then realized that it was colder than it had been a few seconds ago. Then I heard a roar that sounded like trucks and tracks clanking, like a bulldozer. It was an armored column of military vehicles coming down the highway towards where I was. I then heard shooting, machine guns, and small arm fire. The armored column was surrounding the building where I was. It was then that I realized that the factory where I was working was not damaged. As a matter of fact, it was still in operation. I could hear the hammer mill still running. Whatever the soldiers were shooting at was inside of the building I was on, and somebody was shooting back. There were 2 tanks in this column. One of them pulled up right in front of the building and began to fire into it. The whole building shook. Then the black craft came, triangular. I saw it, but I didn't believe it. It made a high-pitched noise, and the tank in front of the building that was firing suddenly exploded. But these soldiers knew what they were doing. One of the wheeled armored vehicles took off across the field, and this craft began to follow it. As it went past the rest of the soldiers and fired simultaneously at the craft, the explosion hurt my ears. But they did knock it down, and it crashed into the field. They all began to cheer, but not for long. The other tank then appeared from nowhere and began firing this big gun at it rapidly until there was nothing left. I was very confused watching this all from the roof. Then I heard more vehicles coming. They were soldiers too. I first thought it was reinforcements, but they began to fight each other. Now I'm totally confused, and there was still someone shooting from inside the building that I was on. I felt that I was in the middle of this. I didn't really know what side I was on. I felt better to stay hidden until I could go and sort things out. I was looking for a safer place when I remembered that they kept a delivery log for the rail cars coming down for materials. In the control room below me, So I decided to go down and see if I could find a date. I climbed down the ladder on the side of the bin and stepped through the door to the control room. There was no one in there. I found a log. The last shipment that was recorded was dated Monday, October 6th, 1997, but the calendar on the wall was turned to November of 97, so I had no idea what day it was actually. From where I was, I could see the whole production floor, but I could see no one moving anywhere. I decided I was safer on the roof where I was, so I climbed back to the bin ladder and hid behind the wall where I could see better. The roof was covered with a layer of ash. I first thought it was covered in light snow. It was cold enough. I assumed the ash was from the burning buildings. As I was looking at the ash, I could see my footprints where I had walked, and then I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up as I realized there were other footprints as well, over mine. I realized I was not alone on this roof, but the footprints were different. They were long and narrow. I followed them with my eyes to see where they went. I didn't have to look far. There he was, I think it was a he, standing about 10 feet from me, but he didn't see me. It was a Draco, like the ones I saw at Epcot. No, Jim saw such creature in an astral type experience, although this experience he claims was not an astral trip. I could feel the adrenaline running through my body. My first thought was to hide, but there was nowhere to hide and nowhere to run. I looked to see if he had a weapon, but I couldn't see any. Then, from deep within me, I felt a rage like I had never had before. I wanted to kill him, apparently responding to the reports that he had heard about on the list in the past concerning what the Dracos do to people, and that they have abducted for their underground concentration camps on Earth, Dulce and such. Before I could even think, I found myself standing up and walking toward him. He turned and saw me. I don't think they showed emotion, but when he saw me, I saw fear in this reptilian-like face. Then I saw his eyes. They were snake eyes, and they looked mean. When I looked at his eyes, I felt as if he was looking right through me. Now, I have been in a number of ballroom brawls, and I could always tell when someone was going to try and sucker punch me by their eyes. It does not work on Dracos. That sucker nailed me, and I didn't even see it coming. I'm not even sure if he had actually hit me physically, or it was a shockwave. Now I've been knocked down in enough fights that I know if you don't get back up fast, you're done. So I sprung up and lunged at him. I caught him off balance. I don't think he expected that I was going to do that. I went for his throat. I found that if you cut off a person's air supply, they come around to your way of thinking pretty fast. But when I grabbed his skinny but rock hard throat, I felt as if I had grabbed a pineapple, and as he moved, I could feel it cutting my hands. I figured I could handle the pain a lot longer than he could go without air. But as I squeezed with all of my strength on his throat, he put his hands on my chest and threw me back. I couldn't hold on. I could tell from that I was no match for him without a weapon. I could tell from this that I was no match for him without a weapon, and I had none. And I knew I had to stay in control and show no fear. I didn't want to lunge at him again because the last time hurt, but I lunged again, this time double my fist, and went for his eyes. But I found out the Draconians have sharp eyelids too. As I began to doubt that I could hurt this creature, and then he spoke. "What's wrong, warrior? Have you underestimated your enemy?" I knew he was right, but I answered, "I wasn't sure you were my enemy, but thanks for straightening that fact out for me." Then I felt the rage building up again, so I lunged again. This time I hit him as hard as I could in the side of the head. I think it stunned him, but not for long. Again, he threw me back, and this time I slid backwards against the exhaust fan of the building. As I tried to get up, he dove atop of me and said, "Now you die for your bad judgment." He felt a lot heavier than he looked. I could not throw him off. I thought I was going to die, but then I saw my east wing hammer. It was hanging on the inside of the vent cover. I reached up and grabbed it and swung as hard as I could at his head. When I hit him, he squealed like a hog. His body went limp and he rolled off of me. Then I kept hitting him just to be sure. They are reptilians. They do have yellow pupils in their snake eyes, and yes, they do die. When I looked up to see what was going out in the road, a second bunch of soldiers were still fighting the first. These were two groups of U.S. soldiers. I decided it was about time for me to get the hell out of Dodge, so I climbed down the ladder and was going to try and get away and find out just what was going on. When I got to the bottom, I felt this dizziness again. I turned, and my truck and Lee were there, and everything was as it was before. I asked him if he had seen anything, and he said no, and asked me what was going on and what happened. I said, "How long was I gone?" And he told me I had just went down the ladder, but then came right back down. Then he asked what had happened to my hands. They were bleeding with very bad cuts. I told him I didn't know. I must have cut myself on the ladder. He looked at me in disbelief and asked what that white stuff was that was all over me, my head and shoulders and legs and such. I said, "I don't know." But it was the ash from the roof. When I finished the job 3 days later, I took my east wing hammer and hung it in the exhaust fan cover on that roof. And that's where it will stay. I don't know how it got there when I needed it, but I am taking no chances. If it weren't for safety factors, I would go exchange my hammer for a 44 mag. Might save me from cutting my hands. Now, if someone could possibly explain this to me, I would be in their debt. I have mixed feelings about this. At first, I felt as if it was mind control to confuse me and the list. But since I have had dreams and obes to make me feel this real, to make me feel like it was real, and also cuts on my hands, redacted, and I believe others on the list were in these dreams, I have been waiting to see if anyone else would share. One question for redacted. Was I in danger? Could the Draco have killed me? What would have happened? Would I have just disappeared or fallen off the ladder? Just one of the many questions. One thing that I do know for sure, don't hit Dracos without gloves on, because it hurts. James. So that was a case file from out of the Reptilian. I have 3 case files right here that are all very similar in nature. We talked about this on the live stream, actually. So someone had brought up if I thought CERN had anything to do with like the Mandela effects. And I said maybe, but here's the thing. CERN and the Hadron Collider doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen like every day for years on end. The Mandela effect has happened. Things have been changing slowly throughout time. And I think what it is like they said in this, once that tree starts to lose energy, one closes into another, then another, then another, then another. And eventually there's no branches. There's just one big mess. And I think that's what happens, is these dimensional slips, or whatever you want to call them, happen. And that may be what the Mandela effect, why it happens and why we are aware of it happening. I really do believe that the draconian, the alien agenda, the one world government, this connection is so... I'm getting more amazed that the more I learn about this, the more I look into it. Just like that family that I talked about the other day. Naval intelligence officers looking into the Tic Tac on the USS Nimitz, looking for the second video, and all of a sudden there's Dogman in his yard, and his kids and his wife are seeing it. His wife are seeing shadow men. Orbs are hitting people in the chest and making them unhealthy. There's a lot of bad stuff going on, and I think it is the draconians and the one world government using the paranormal to keep us in check, to keep us afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of learning, afraid of lashing out. I don't know, just an idea. Today's second encounter. The crawler humanoids are real. I've been looking for answers for 2 years. What the hell was it that I saw in the woods that frightens me for life? This is no joke. Did anyone else see this creature? I am traumatized for life from this thing. It happened at my parents' house in rural Maine. I need to know what it is. How did I see it? And why I'm so scared. I'm a smoker. And at my parents' house, you cannot smoke. You have to smoke outside. That night, I couldn't sleep. It was around 3 a.m., so I decided to go outside and have a cigarette. When I got to the porch and turned the light on, I had a weird feeling that I was being watched. So I looked and saw 2 large orange dots. Then, before freaking out, I'm thinking it must be a reflection of the neighbor's light through the trees. Then it moves. It did this peeking move behind a tree back and forth 2 times. I freaked the hell out when it started to look closer at me. I run to the patio door trying to open the door, but since it's an old patio door, it does not open smoothly. I had to force it. The things started to run up the hill, over the train rail, into the highway. It moved incredibly fast. The path it took was not easy. It had a weird gait. Those orange eyes continued staring at me and seemed to want to get closer to me. When I got into the house, I wanted to look from the large window. I woke up my parents, not knowing what to say to them. My dad laughed at me, saying it's probably a moose, and didn't do anything about it. This area is right beside a highway, in the area that only has 4 houses that are a big distance between them. I regularly see wolves, moose, and all kinds of animals at night, so I know what they look like. When this thing ran, it made a weird sound. I don't know how to describe it. It had long arms and legs. It ran weird on 4 legs. On 4 legs, it still looked like it was more than 6 feet off the ground. It was so tall and fast when it ran. I was shocked. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. I was traumatized. This isn't a joke. Was it a deformed creature? Was it an alien? I don't know. I've never been able to sleep properly since that day. It has really messed me up. My mom keeps saying the dog, once in a while, just barks at night as it watches the woods. I'm not saying it's still around, but it still freaks me out. I saw what I saw. I wish I never saw that thing. I wish I never went outside for a cigarette that night. I have night terrors a lot because of this thing. I feel like crying. I feel like it took something from me. Tonight's final experience. I live in a small town in northeastern PA that is surrounded by farms and endless forests. As a kid, I spent most of my time fishing for trout or building stick forts. Now I have bonfires and hunt deer. So, as you can imagine, I'm outside a lot of the times. At this point, I know almost every paw print or call of the local animals and I can identify it almost immediately. At the age of 13, I went over to one of my friend's house for his birthday, mid-June, alongside with 2 other guys. We used to hang out a lot, but after this incident, things happened, and we just broke apart and went our own ways. Anyway, we were crazy and imagined exploring abandoned places and finding paranormal spirits, as all the YouTubers used to do at the time. 3 miles into the forest was an abandoned quarry. All of us were excited to explore it. So we got to the birthday boy, his name was Aiden, to lie to his dad and say we were going for a walk through the woods. Aiden's dad said yeah, but not to wander too far and to pay attention to the trees due to the number of mountain lion sightings in the recent area. Many say they do not live here in PA, said to be a boogeyman of sort, but I've seen one in my own eyes, and I can tell you, there are wolves here. Along with wolves, there are mountain lions. We geared up and grabbed our phones and knives. Well, at the time I didn't have a knife, but I borrowed one from one of the bigger guys. His name was Clayton, and he was a little out of shape, putting it nicely. He usually brought up to 10 knives to our parties like some sort of serial killer. Sometimes he made me worry. He also gave one of our 4th guy named Marcel, more ghetto than country kid, but he was okay. We got along. As we packed our bags and got ready to poke fun at each other, I insulted Aiden's choice of footwear, wearing a pair of black and white Vans while the rest of us wore boots. Clayton poked fun at me for being the smallest of the group, and Marcel backed up Clayton. As we headed out the door, excited for what we were going to find in an amazing abandoned quarry, imagining old mine shafts deep into the ground where coal was mined, or copper. The air seemed to change as in heavier, like when a kid in class threatens to kill everyone in the room. Yeah, that kind of heavy. Almost a primitive fear. As I eerily looked around, curious about what had instilled this primitive fear into my system, the others were talking about what we were going to find. As we were walking into the woods after going through the long field, the feeling of dread was getting stronger, and I almost wanted to run. I knew I was being watched. I always know when someone stares at me in class, I usually look in the direction at them when I notice the feeling. I started to scan my surroundings. Maple trees, rocks, cliffs, bones, birds, beehives. Wait, bones? Backtracked to where I saw the bones and looked a little closer. About 60 yards away at the bottom of a cliff was a dead deer. Fresh blood still on the bones. Flesh hanging off its skull, I imagined. The thing that could have mutilated it so badly. Nothing exactly exciting happened as we climbed the large hill. I felt the air get heavier and my primal fear clawing its way up my spine. Once we reached the top of the hill, there was a level part still filled with the maple and birch trees, and some decent-sized rocks. There was a barbed wire fence that led to a clearing, freshly mowed field. Aiden commented, saying that this was his property and his neighbor was probably trespassing again. As we got to the fence, I noticed something red hanging from the fence, a rag or a piece of cloth covered in dried blood. And underneath was a rusted old knife with a saw blade on one side and a sharp edge on the other. Myself and Marcel argued for a minute about who was getting the knife, and I gave in and let him have it. We crawled under the fence and walked through the field. Right now, we are about a half a mile from the quarry. I zoned out again as we walked. No one was talking about anything exciting anyway, and I scanned my surroundings when my fear jumped almost right out of me. I couldn't place it as I frantically looked around. Something bad. So, something evil was nearby, and I could sense it. I was at the back of the line, so no one noticed my panic. I went tree to tree scanning for something out of place, and when I got to the birch, roughly 25 feet away, I saw it. There was a large, lengthy gray hand wrapped around the tree. I could almost make out claws. I looked above the hand and I could just barely see an edge of a head. I looked at my friend who had gotten a bit ahead of me, looked back at the tree and the gray thing was gone. I ran to catch up to my friends, deciding to keep what I saw quiet so not to be made fun of for the rest of the weekend. We finally started to see the clearing up ahead, with another barbed wire fence. We walked through the patch of thorn bush, as tall as myself. It shredded our bare torsos as we took off our shirts and hung them over our shoulders. We crouched under a fence. It made it to the quarry. We all spun around towards the woods, hearing his dad, but it was off, almost mechanical. Startled by how quiet it was, also a whisper, but the woods were 100 yards away. My fear crawled its way back inside of me, and I wanted to go home knowing something was up. "Guys, we need to go," I stated, walking toward the tree line. The others followed. My fear grew stronger and stronger. I started to scan the field, then the cliff, then the trees. As I was walking, we were at the tree line, scrambling under the fence. Snap! A branch cracked not too far from me. We all looked. Marcel still under the fence. We saw it, 20 yards away. This 9-foot human-like animal creature. Not an animal. It stood on 2 legs like a human. Its gray, skinny arms ended by its knees, and its claws were as large as its hands. It was partially crouched, perched its elbows on its knees, staring at us with these red-hot eyes. Teeth struck out of its mouth like a piranha, with large canines like the dog. Its teeth were an ugly yellow and blackish, with some blood stains on the top. We stood, frozen, staring at this creature. Then its eyes snapped at mine. I made eye contact and twitched. In fear, I let out a gasp. Its eyes perked up as it heard my gasp and looked as if it was pleasure. It stood up, breaking into my trance, and I jumped into flight mode. "Run!" I screamed, making a dash home. The field, only 50 yards away, the creature let out this metallic, human, bear-like roar. Its scream filled me with fear. I could sense the hate in its veins. The monster was primal fear. We ran like hell as it chased us, dodging left, right, changing direction, tripping it up so it couldn't catch us. We dove under the barbed wire fence and kept running. I looked back to see it hurdle the fence like it was nothing, hot on her heels, running on all fours. I tripped over a branch and rolled, catching myself, and kept running. But at this point, at the back of the line, it let out another scream, and I jumped off a nearby cliff to the right. My friends did the same. It was only a 15-foot drop into some dead leaves and grass, so we did land. Except I rolled my ankle in the process. Aiden landed on his knee. I looked back and saw that I almost landed on the deer carcasses from earlier. That gave me a spark of renewed energy. The tree line was only 300 yards away, and we ran like hell. We heard it screech and scramble down the hill at full speed. We vaulted over the rocks and slid under the fallen trees, and this thing was right on us the whole time. Teeth bared, roaring in hatred. I knew the only goal of this abomination was to mutilate us like it did that deer. We ran and ran. Then it roared again. This time it sounded almost like defeat. We cleared the tree line and ran to the road. We turned back around to see where it was. It stood up at the tree line, almost out of view, but still visible enough. "Evan!" croaked in a voice unnatural and satanic, almost like a demon in the movies, but metallic. I didn't mention this before, but my name is Evan. My friends always call each other mean things, so we rarely use our real names. Instead of primal fear this time, I felt primal rage. I turned and yelled. This thing simply smiled, turned around, and walked away. We all looked at each other and went back to the house. Aiden's dad didn't hear the screams, so we had to explain nothing. We went and hid in his room in silence. None of us really talked about it much, except for me. If I was to ask them now about it, they would probably say we saw a bear and that we overreacted. And there you have it, folks. I do hope you all enjoyed today's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that helps the channel to continue to grow and go. And honestly, what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Please, everyone, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and our friends. These creatures are real. These events have happened. Share this with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the truth. And God bless you all.